What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the after credits scene. We are talking Thor Love and Thunder. This is a full movie review which includes some spoilers. Check the description down below for a list of links to the different chapters and the different things we're talking about, so you can skip right to the stuff that you want to look at. We're going to do a spoiler-free review here first, but before we do that, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell so when we drop new content, you'll be the first one to know about it. And then please share this sucker all across the multiverse. Let's get right to it. Spoiler-free review here. I thought the movie was a whole lot of fun. On a con side first, I can see how some people might watch this movie and feel like it was a little disjointed. Not in so much of the plot or the way that the story plays out, but there are a lot of moments, and it's just the way that Taika Waititi writes his stories and the way that he's taken on this character. There are a lot of moments where there are some very emotional scenes that get cut pretty quickly at the end with some kind of humor, some kind of joke, a screaming goat, all kinds of different things that might leave some people put off by it. Because I know some people like to kind of sit in that moment and have a moment to really ponder or think through what they just heard or what's going on, and you don't really get a chance to sit in it because they kind of move ahead. The movie did feel full. I thought the resolution of it and some of the writing and the way that certain things came together was really excellent. The trailers bill this as Thor's search for identity, and I thought without hitting it right on the nose, they did a really good job of bringing him along storyline wise. I thought Jane's storyline was really great, and the way that they pulled in some other characters and kept them integral to the story was really excellent. There's a whole lot of things here about what's coming in phase 4 and beyond that we'll talk about at the end here, particularly with regard to where they're headed in terms of the MCU. So I think you'll like it. If you go in expecting to see something super deep, something super dramatic, something that's going to move the MCU forward, probably going to be disappointed. If you go in just looking for a fun, exciting movie, something with some good action, that is a good escapist type movie, gives a little bit of backstory to the MCU, moves some of the story along, introduces some new characters, and some new mythology, you're going to be pleasantly surprised. And it was a whole lot of fun just to watch and it be just an experience. I know a lot of times on this channel I preach that I like when Marvel does something different. I like when they take chances. And as far as just the weirdness of this one, they took chances. But the overall demeanor of Marvel, the quippiness, the fun aspect of it, all that was there, and I loved kind of getting back to some of that as well. The movie is visually stunning. There's some scenes and some different places that they travel to that are shot in such a way that really make for some awesome visuals, and I thought those things were excellent. Especially, I remember a couple of times while I was watching it, thinking about how well the trailers were put together, that they gave you the story, but they didn't give away certain aspects of the movie that I felt like, oh, I've already seen this. And so in that regard, I thought that was really cool. There was a lot of really awesome stuff just to see and just enjoy. I felt myself getting lost in it several times. There were a couple of moments where sometimes I take notes during the movie, or I text a friend or something like that, and I forgot to do a ton of that during the movie because I was so engrossed in what I was watching, and it was just a lot of fun to watch. So moving on from here, if you haven't seen the movie yet, save this, bookmark it, come back to it later, but we're moving into some spoiler territory. So first off, starting off with Christian Bale, amazing, did an amazing job in this movie. His acting, his reactions to things, the little things that not only made him a likable character, but also pushed him over into this, wow, this is a really bad guy. And were phenomenal. The way that the story ends up here and his whole journey was very full. I liked that. I did not hesitate for a moment to think that his story was going to end up any differently than once you kind of figured out what his end game was there. I kind of knew a little bit of what was going to happen with his story, and so I thought that fit very well. The Necro Sword was an excellent addition. The voices, the way it had a life of its own, and the way they played off of that with Zeus's Thunderbolt, the way they played off it with Stormbreaker and Mjolnir, even though they play off the relationship between Stormbreaker, Mjolnir, and Thor as a little funny. I still thought was, even though it was humorous, I still thought that these things kind of have a life of their own. I liked that they played into that a little bit more and even used that with the Necro Sword, so it didn't feel out of place. And that weapon seemed very, very menacing. And I hope this isn't the last we've seen of it. I know they destroy it at the end of this movie, but I think somewhere, some way, it's still around, especially because Marvel has a lot of good stories that they can tell that surround that sword, particularly with Null the Conqueror, and all those kind of things that have come out recently have been really excellent. So first off, getting past some of the acting that I thought was excellent, all of those, Christian Bale did great, Natalie Portman was excellent, and getting to see all of them kind of work together was fantastic. Russell Crowe in a really silly type of performance was really cool. It added some brevity to something that could have been played as very grandiose. I thought was funny and an interesting choice. The cameos with the Asgardian players who are living in New Asgard and now are performing scenes from Thor Ragnarok were hilarious, and it was funny to get to see them again. Melissa McCarthy pretending to be Hela was hilarious. And then if you didn't see the little cameo of her husband, Ben Falcone, he comes out as the director of the performance at the end, and so I thought that was really funny as well. It's always cool to see him pop up someplace too. So all of those cameos were excellent, and the different characters that popped up in different roles were a lot of fun to see. You want to dive further into those, there's a whole bunch of those, a whole bunch of Easter eggs that we'll get to here in just a little bit. Korg doing the intro and then popping back in every so often to kind of lend some mythology and some lore to the story was really awesome. And the interactions with the children on top of that really made this feel like you were getting lore and mythology, almost as though Thor was going to disappear, Thor was going to be gone, and you had all these stories that were just legend. I liked that aspect of it. I remember thinking right at the beginning that I would love to see Korg and Luis do narration of the entire MCU, and that would have been great. And again, Korg telling these stories from his own perspective and lending some bravado to it, but also adding the humor to it was really, really cool to see. The soundtrack through the entire thing was excellent. If you want to dive deeper into that, I would suggest you look up some videos, Google those particular songs, in particular Sweet Child of Mine, November Rain, and Paradise City. All three of those songs end up popping up in pretty key moments, and they foreshadow some scenes in the movie if you listen to the lyrics. And so there was a lot of metal and a lot of hairband stuff in the movie, but it wasn't used to the point that I thought it was distracting. And when they did use those songs, it was a lot of fun, and it fit really well, similar to Led Zeppelin getting used in Thor Ragnarok. So that was really excellent. It was a whole lot of fun. The different characters, particularly with the children, getting to see Heimdall's son, and this back and forth between, well, his name was supposed to be this, or your name is Astrid, your name is this. No, it's Axel. I'm going by Axel. I liked that Marvel kind of played with, well, this is who it's supposed to be. Well, yeah, but we're changing it. I thought was fine. It was funny, and moving forward, it was just a cool way to say, hey, we're going to make this our own thing. I thought it was really cool that Heimdall spent time in the first three movies teaching Thor how to connect with him, and then Thor gets an opportunity to teach Heimdall's son how to use his power a little better as well. Was an interesting moment, and things that they didn't have to add in there, but it was all foreshadowing, leading to some things. Thor being here with the children, connecting with the children, leading to what we know happens at the end, was a really cool plot line and a really cool thread that they ran through the entire movie about Thor trying to figure out who he is, and not so much about figuring out who he was in the form of, well, I've got to be tied to these people, but just figuring out who he wants to be and how he wants to lead his life, and another step in him being the king that he's supposed to be, having the same rhythms that his father did, but doing them in his own way. I thought was really cool throwbacks to the other movies that we've seen, but also a really cool progression of just a humanistic story of how we become our parents and how we become the adults that we become. Was really cool to explore, and there's a whole lot of things surrounding that idea, particularly with morality and religion, that I will get to at the end, because Bible major me has to talk about that. So just the different things. We'll talk Easter eggs real quick. Beyond the story, a lot of the Easter eggs can be found not just in the Guardians of the Galaxy section, who they got rid of pretty quickly, which was fine by me. They've got their own story. I loved that you got to see them. They got to be a part of that, and you got to see that they're going around dealing with these things too, but that Thor has his own journey, and they were together for a little while, and then they separated. And so it'll be interesting to see where they head from there. I always enjoy seeing Mantis and Nebula, and all those characters was really excellent to see in the way that they played together. But it is a Thor movie, and so they sent them on to deal with another aspect of whatever's going on here. And so you didn't get a ton with them, but it was a good place to start. Where is Thor? And he's trying to find himself here with these people, but that's not working either. And so you get some Easter eggs there, particularly with the Buscan soldiers and King Yakan, and then some different Guardians of the Galaxy things. And then they move into New Asgard. They move into some of the things that are going on there. I thought that the different throwback jokes to the way that New Asgard had become very commercialized. They had infinity cones as an ice cream place. You have Valkyrie doing an Old Spice commercial, and all these different little things that were just really funny. And I'm sure that there was a lot of playfulness where they got to come up with those things as they were creating the story. Once you get to Omnipotent City, there are tons and tons of Easter eggs. The easiest way to see some of those is just to go to the IMDb page and look through the credits. Some of them are credited, some of them aren't. One of Zeus's sons, Dionysus, is credited and has a line in the movie. You get Bao, god of dumplings. You get the rock god of Korg, and all these other different gods. Let's see, I made me a list. Aztec gods, Artemis, a Maori god, a Mayan princess, goddess of the dead. You have a fur god, a masked god. Thor mentions Ra, which I thought, if you've seen Moon Knight, we know how some of those things work. And this whole realm where there are gods that are protected was an interesting place to introduce it. The outer shot of that place is almost a shot-for-shot comic panel of what you see in the comic books. And then I thought the addition of the Celestials as they fly out of there was an interesting addition, a little callback to the Eternals. We know that these guys are around, that they kind of hang out with these gods as well. And then some of the little lines that Zeus gave, that we'll talk about when we get down to what this means for the future, were very telling as well. We'll throw the after credit scenes in here as Easter eggs, and we'll talk about them again later. But Brett Goldstein being cast as Hercules is fantastic, and what they do with him is going to be awesome. I was just excited for Brett Goldstein because if you know anything about his story, from becoming Roy Kent, being a writer on Ted Lasso, it's really cool to see him getting a big role like that and being able to be a character like that was going to be really cool. Then getting to see Valhalla, Jane is there, Heimdall is there. We can assume that Odin is there. And so there's a whole lot of different things that you could assume from that. And what that means, we will talk about here at the end of the video. Other Easter eggs, we got to see a stunning tribute in the form of Chris Pratt's backside to Loki. There is a list of fallen heroes, which includes Tony Stark, Natasha Romanoff, and then a Rest in Mischief little banner, almost looks like a tramp stamp, but all across Thor's back. And so as funny as that was, it was just another reminder of how far Thor has come and the different things that he has endured, which I thought Korg did a really good job of in a very humorous way at the beginning of the movie, is reminding them, here's all the people he's lost and here's what's gone on in his life. And he's gone from one battle to another, one trauma to another, and he hasn't had a chance to decide who he wants to be because he's been reacting to all these things for so long. And this was a time where he got to choose to do something that other people would not do. And so when it comes to Easter eggs, I thought they made good use of them, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. The way they used the location of eternity and what eternity looked like, I thought was a really cool shot from the comics as well, where the character looks like space and time itself is really interesting. And then in that location where Gore is trying to get to eternity, there's a whole bunch of heads and statues that are different gods and different things that we've seen before. But the one that falls on the children that Thor protects them from is actually the head of Ereshkigal, and we saw interactions with that one, that celestial in Eternals. So you could probably, once this thing comes out on Disney Plus, you're gonna be able to pause it and check out all these different eggs and see all these different things that are there. And they'll have a lot of different iterations and things that can pop up that are really interesting. Beyond that, there were a couple of different little, and I won't call them Easter eggs, but we will end with these. The two things that I thought were very funny, the rock god of Korg's people is actually sitting on a throne of scissors when we see him. Looks very Game of Thrones-esque, but if you'll remember, Taika Waititi is very fond of his rock, paper, scissors jokes, and the rock god sitting on a throne of scissors, being that rock beats scissors, is really funny. And then Korg's partner at the end of the movie, whose name is Dwayne The Rock, I thought was really funny as well, and a really funny choice, and I'm interested to see what Mr. Johnson himself thinks about his likeness being used in the movie. Beyond that, I just kind of want to talk real briefly about what we learned. A movie this broad and the things that are going on, what did we learn? Where did we end up? So we know that Jane is still out there somewhere. I don't think they would have shown you Valhalla and shown you that she's still around, even though she's dead, if there weren't some possibility that they might want to bring her back in the future. Her or Heimdall or any others that hey, they're dead, and it's going to take a whole lot to bring them back, but they're here. I thought that was really interesting. Hercules, obviously, popping up, and Zeus sending him out to go after Thor. Could be an interesting series. It could be another great movie. He could pop up someplace else. But throwing in those characters into the mix is going to be an interesting addition, and there's something there that we're going to talk about for what's possibly coming next in just a moment. So beyond that, some of the things that they talked about that are from the first couple of movies that are now mythology and lore for the children that grew up hearing about these stories of Thor, that will hear about Jane Foster and hear about her story, and then moving forward into different characters, what they decide to do with Thor's daughter now, who has powers that were granted to her by eternity, and how they decide to weave her in. You can call it a little Easter egg, but that girl is actually Chris Hemsworth's daughter. And so she got into the movie, as well as Chris Hemsworth's son, who is one of the versions of Thor running through the trees at the beginning of the movie. What they decide to do with those characters, the gods that are out there, there's a whole bunch of gods that are now dead. There are gods and celestials that are now reeling from these things that have happened, and a whole bunch of worlds that are now unprotected by their gods, that now need the protection of somebody, be it Thor, the Guardians of the Galaxy, a Captain Marvel. There's a lot of disorder out there and there's a lot of chaos, and these characters are the ones that are going to be able to kind of put it back together. So as far as an overarching thing, that's a big one. New Asgard and how Valkyrie moves forward there is going to be interesting to see. And a lot of this movie happened in space and had to do with those worlds, so it didn't really affect hardly anything on Earth except in that one location. So I don't think it has any ramifications really for Earth at the moment, but as far as these realms out here, these other worlds, these other universes, there's going to be some ramifications there, and it's leading to something different. I think it was a good wrap-up for Thor's story, where they can use him in different places without having to tell a whole new story, and they can also pull in these other characters individually in different movies if they want to as well. So without actually getting rid of Thor completely like they did with Captain America or Iron Man, they were able to wrap up a story for him and give him a path forward if they want to, without actually needing to use him all the time and sign him to a big contract. And so in that regard, I thought it was good, but it means that we might not get to see as much of Thor as we thought we would, even though the tag at the end of the movie says Thor will return. They've got plans for him, obviously, but where he pops up, I would imagine is going to be in some big crossover rather than some standalone movie. So we'll see. Wrapping up here, other things to consider. Ramifications for the future. I've heard a lot of people talk about what's coming in the MCU, what's going on with Phase 4. It seems very disjointed and I don't like it, and blah, 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 blah. I'd like to take a moment just to explain and remind people that it took Marvel 10 years to get to Infinity War and Endgame. 21 movies to get to those 2 movies. And I know people say, well, those were characters I cared about and this and that. You might not like these characters. That's a totally different discussion. But I think Marvel has a better idea now that they know in 20-something movies, 30-something movies, however many series, they're headed towards this, that they know that they can overlap some things. Right now, if you remember back to stories like Iron Man 2, Iron Man 3, let's just use those as an example. You got some stories that were very pointed. You got origin stories that felt like they went somewhere. This ordinary man becomes Iron Man, and that was a big jump. Iron Man 2, not really a big jump. He creates an element that keeps him from dying. Iron Man 3, not really a big jump. The thing that you thought might have been big with the Mandarin ended up not being so big. And so even then, you had these large stories that felt too broad. We didn't get all the answers in Iron Man 1 that we wanted. There was so much out there left to discuss. Or these small stories that seemed to go nowhere. Iron Man 2, Iron Man 3. We're still in those phases. We're still in those stories where some of these movies may not feel like required viewing, like Eternals, but I think later on are going to be required viewing because you're going to need to know some of these things, and all of these different things are piecing together. Here's what I see so far, and I'm curious to see what you think. Thus far, I'm just going to give you a few examples. You can go and look at the other ones. They all hold true in some way, shape, form, or fashion. Moon Knight talks about these unseen characters, these avatars, these Egyptian gods that are walking among us in the form of avatars. Miss Marvel talks about people that are walking among us who are actually jinn from the Noor dimension, but they're living in secret. Shang-Chi talks about not only a realm called Ta Lo that we didn't know existed, but also includes people in our world that are walking around with these powers that we didn't know existed, like the Ten Rings, these shadow organizations, and somebody like the Mandarin who walks around with this power that we didn't know about, who is shaping things. Black Widow, even though we knew about the Widows, you find out that the Red Room is still around, that the Widows are still around. They're this secret organization still running around and doing things in secret. Thor included a lot of those same things in the form of gods that are around, that are not doing anything but are there. We're going to get Secret Invasion coming up soon, which is going to be about the Skrulls, who are people who live in our world who are walking around in secret. and even anything to do with the multiverse. WandaVision, Spider-Man No Way Home, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. All of these deal with things that, hidden worlds, these things that are in secret that we don't know about, that are going on, that are all leading towards, I think, secret wars. I think somewhere phase 4, phase 5, we're going to be dealing with secret wars, and all this introduction of the multiverse and Kang is really just the long game that's going to jump over all of that and lead to our next big Infinity War Endgame type story in phase 6 or whatever, that ends up being Doctor Doom and Kang. So not only are they playing towards Avengers Age of Ultron, but they are playing towards Infinity War Endgame, where all of these things are going to piece back together, and you're going to get to see where, wow, all of these things were coming together all this time. I would encourage you to look at some of these other stories. There are a lot of them are about these hidden groups of people that we didn't know existed, which makes perfect sense after Endgame and Infinity War, that all of these different entities would come out of the woodwork and vie for power and try to figure things out, and we become aware of them. I think Black Panther Wakanda Forever is going to be the exact same thing, except we're going to be talking about Atlanteans and Namor. And so I guess, you heard it here first. I know we already know that Namor is going to be there, but this hidden world that is out there, similar to the way that Wakanda was hidden as well. So curious to see what you guys think about that. I can't leave here without talking about the religious imagery, the idea of gods and God not taking care of his people, that people cried out to God, that Gorr cried out to God, and God did not hear him, or God refused to answer, even though God existed. And then Gorr goes on this journey to save himself rather than relying on a God. And then, even at the end of the story, he looks to a God to protect his child in the form of Thor. I would say the difference between the God that Gorr prays to at the beginning, who is Rappa, who did nothing, and Thor, is that Thor is the only God in this entire movie that actually fights for his people. He goes and he asks the other gods, come and fight to protect your people, to protect yourselves, and they say they won't. And Thor says, we're going to go and do it ourselves. We're going to do it ourselves. The imagery at the beginning of the movie where Gorr holds his daughter in the wilderness, in the desert. You can look in the Bible and look at wilderness imagery, desert imagery. Even with regard to Thor's story of trying to become who he's supposed to be and being called out of the wilderness is a huge storyline in the Bible. The Israelites get called out of the wilderness. John the Baptist calls people to the wilderness. They're baptized, they hear the message of Jesus, and then they are called back into the rest of the world to preach to people, to share the good news. There's all of these things about being called to the wilderness to discover who you are, and then being called out of the wilderness to share that message with others. And so you could liken Gorr's journey to the same journey that Thor has to make. They both start out in a wilderness place, although Thor's is more metaphorical and emotional. And then we see at the end, they both end up in this in eternity, in this place that is surrounded by water, and their stories end up coming together. And so from a purely universalist standpoint, you could talk about how we're all connected, how we're all reliant on each other. I tell my students this all the time, that nothing in Scripture, in God's Word, is done outside of relationship, whether it's relationship with people, relationship between God and his people, Jesus and God, Jesus and the Holy Spirit, us and the Holy Spirit. All these different things are connected. And I thought even in this movie, the imagery of being connected and the voices that you listen to, who you let in and who you don't, and the decisions that we make, even with Gorr and the Necro Sword and being corrupted by that, and Gorr trying to be a good father to his daughter, Thor trying to be a good leader for his people. All those different stories piecing themselves together, loss and love, and all those different elements were really, really great. And how love can be born out of trauma, and love and purpose can be born out of something that appears to be awful, but but something good can come of it. And I thought the little tag that Thor is thunder and his new daughter is love, and the whole movie, you know, love and thunder leading up to that was really cool. The only other imagery that I thought was fantastic in that regard is right at the end where Thor, similar to the way Odin does when he's talking to Mjolnir and casting Thor out, Thor gets to take this lightning bolt and give, although temporarily, power to these children to have the power of Thor. And you see it in the form of this tree branching out where these children have this power, and then they're able to fight. What I thought was excellent about that, and to me was just gave me Jesus, God, Holy Spirit vibes, was Thor gives the children this power, but he tells them to fight the shadow monsters. Now, if you want to talk about little kids holding their teddy bears and fighting the monsters under their bed, that's cool imagery as well. But Thor, this God character, or this son of Odin, this son of God, gives his power to these children, and these children then fight what you could call demons, you can call them shadow monsters, but they're actually just figments or representations of the actual bad guy, Gore, and his power. You could even go one step further and say that the sword, the thing that he listens to, is evil, and Gore is someone that can be redeemed. And so, but the children never have to fight Gore. They never have to fight the devil, Satan character in this scene here. They just fight the things that Satan sends at them. As a Christian, you could talk about temptation, you could talk about demons, you could talk about all kinds of things there. But the Bible's very clear that even the archangel Michael, when interacting with Satan, says, "The Lord judge you, God condemn you, not me." That it's God's job to do that. And Jesus' sole job was to come down and intercede on our behalf, to fight the forces of evil and to do things that we couldn't do. And Jesus steps in between us and Satan and takes that on and fights that battle for us. And so I thought that imagery of the children fighting with God's power, but the God himself fighting the real evil in place of us, was a really cool connection and a really awesome way to do that as well. And so all kinds of imagery that way. Like I said, I'm a youth minister. I'm going to see that stuff everywhere, and I thought that was really awesome. The movie was a whole lot of fun, and I thought it was really well written for all the weirdness and the goofiness and the ridiculousness. I thought it was really well written, and I thought it was just a fun story. My wife said it was her new favorite Marvel movie. We laughed during the whole thing, and I don't know about you, but I cannot wait to find some plush goats that will scream when I squeeze them. So I think that would be hilarious. I'm sure they're out there somewhere already, that they have tooth grinder and those different elements out there somewhere, and I intend to find them. So tell us what you guys think. There's a whole lot here in this movie. Tell us if you liked it. Tell me if you didn't like it. Subscribe to the channel, like the channel, share these videos all across the multiverse. Check out some of our other content over here. Got tons of stuff to sink your teeth into, and when the next one drops, we'll catch you right back here. Later, guys.